right. Hey, everyone. This is David March. I'm your host here of the Growth Mindset Podcast. I have a wonderful co-host, Patrick Brown, and a brand new guest that we're very excited about here, Benjamin.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sure, yes. You're happy you're here. And so this episode is going to be more about leadership. Ben is a leadership coach. I've seen him in action. He's fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit more deeper about some leadership styles. This is going to build upon our previous episode with Major in the military. And it's going to take some little different turns as Benjamin and I are both coaches and gonna be a great episode. All right, guys. So I want to start this episode the same way I actually started off the last one because I think it's just so important. This really what this whole article is about, or this whole episode is about, is two things. The first, throughout my working life, I've consistently found myself working with what's called old school bosses, which can be said different ways: fear-based leadership, autocratic leadership, toxic leadership. It's said different ways, but it's kind of pointing at the same kind of thing. One where there's more of a dictatorship instead of a collaboration between everyone. And one where it's more of a fear-based motivation. And in telling my story here and in doing these types of episodes, what we're looking to do really is turning karma into mission. One would say it's my karma to be in this pattern of receiving these bosses so that I could change it. You could look at this from the lens of like, turning karma to mission is similar to like ending generational trauma for a particular generation, where it's like, where there was a generation of people that were doing this type of leadership, and now we're looking to end that and to kind of inspire people and encourage people on this new path, which is more inspirational leadership. And I've gotten into this myself because I've done a lot of career transition coaching, working with people to, working with the resumes, working with career coaching, doing outreach so that they get to the next level in the growth. But along the way, what I've noticed was, people don't leave positions, they leave bad bosses because they're actually going to do the same position that they did before, just in a new environment with a new boss. So it's really the same exact job. So what I was thinking was, it seems to me like what needs to happen is actually a change in the leadership themselves so they can create some proactive career pathing, so they can create some environment that is collaborative enough so that the person can grow within the company instead of them having to quit, use a career transition coach to make the transition so they can get some career growth. The bottleneck really is the leadership at that company, whoever is executive CEO, that is inhibiting the growth, that is not listening to the employees, that is getting a lot of resistance every time one of the employees say, I'm a high performing employee, I've been doing really well for all these years, but I'm stagnant and I'm not going anywhere. And the only option they have is to leave the company to make a jump somewhere else. So that's why this is going on. So what this episode's going on is what I'm looking to inspire. It's what this episode is about and what my mission is here in this, to kind of create this change and leadership. So yeah, so as a leadership coach, and what are your thoughts on what I'm saying so far?
I love that you picked out, use the word environment, right? Because I believe leaders craft a particular space and a feeling, right? So you mentioned in your article towards the end, promoting psychological safety, which that's the pillar of my leadership framework. And so good luck getting someone to tell you how they really feel, getting someone to challenge your ideas, getting someone to take a risk, getting someone to accept critical feedback when there's no psychological safety. You're basically starting in a hole. And, I think part of a big piece of this discussion is we haven't really had a lot of education and training around how to facilitate spaces like that. It's always just been, you are a great individual contributor, you're now promoted to manager, and you just tell everybody else that is in that position what to do. But we both know from coaching, telling people what to do doesn't work very well. Actually, you don't have to be a coach to know that. Go look at your relationships where you tell someone what to do. How does that work out? Typically, it doesn't. And so that's part of what I think this karmic work that you describe. And it's funny, I'll tell you a story. A quick story. went to my mechanic a couple months ago, and we were chatting. He's a chatterbox, and he was asking me what I did, and told him I was a leadership coach, did leadership workshops, one-on-one coaching, etc. And he was had a military background,
Ah,
and he said, "I've got a couple leaders that I was under that I would run through a brick wall for, and I've got other ones that if I saw in front of me right now, I would light on fire and eat popcorn while they burned alive." And
wow.
then he looked at me and he said, "And I learned from them both." So that's part, when I saw your podcast is called the Growth Mindset Podcast, right? That's part of the lens, right, of our karmic work is like whatever it is, it's all grist for the mill for us to do this work and evolve. So I thought that would be a little anecdote to share.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually perfect. That's actually perfect. I really appreciate that. I like the juxtaposition of the both, right? Because you can learn from both perspectives. And again, we were saying this before as well, but it's all about alignment and finding out what rings true for you. So yeah, so that's really good. And so, in moving on, one of the things that I really think it would be an interesting debate, discussion, really, on is this concept of the, like, in the workplace, it's like this juxtaposition of like being a behaviorist and being a psychologist. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There's particular bosses out there that are like, hey, if you want to move up, here, do these actions. So they fill them up with all this additional work, but they never talk about how they feel. Like psychologists, just kind of, there's no goals in place, there's no metrics in place, there's no agreement in writing or in anything that any of this additional work that you're taking on will lead to an actual promotion. It's just do this work and, let me see the behaviors. Let me see you, be the person that can really grow and develop into this. But again, the issue is that it invites abuse. That's
Yeah.
the main issue.
I think that's really, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. That's one of the most major issues of the whole situation. When the work environment doesn't have clear metrics on what promotions are supposed to, how they take place, then plenty of people are working really hard, hoping for the promotion, but never really understanding what it is and what's necessary. And a lot of times, I think a lot of supervisors don't even consider how to incentivize better work as opposed to just doing what is within company regulations or company expectations. I think our ideas of quote unquote, you're incentivizing someone moving up or even thinking about it, it's like you're already getting paid. So what more do you want? As opposed to, I will show you a ladder on how to get more if you're willing to take the steps, thus increasing productivity. Yeah, it's a lot going missing in the idea of managerial skills or supervisor, because a lot of people look at management as more logistics as far as the company's product and numbers as opposed to the personnel as well when they have to do, managerial work.
Yeah, and I think you touch on something that's near and dear to me, Patrick, and it really the role of a leader, right? So yes, of course, a company has the things they need to get done, right? So part of leading a team is like we have to build 25 widgets or whatever the thing is. You got to do that. But the other part of leadership is how can you build your people up along the way so that they're growing and developing towards wherever they want to go. And you want to, the great leaders can align both of those things. Um, how can I think the role of a leader, obviously, one is to get that work done, but two, help your people see a bigger version of themselves and then help enroll them in that bigger version of themselves and then accommodate through the work that you're doing them to scaffold their skill set and grow so that that promotion or that salary isn't the only incentive or motivation
Yeah.
that's at play.
Absolutely.
I think that's huge. Like, people leave for multiple different reasons. It's not just money. That is the main thing. There's a lot of other aspects too. If they're bored, they're not learning, they're finding the job to be monotonous, just same thing over and over again. They're not giving it's really the leadership is not giving opportunities for them to grow. And usually, not all the time, but usually that stems from not trusting in the capability of that person. And when another individual doesn't trust the capability of another individual, that is not creating a good feeling. And that's kind of the idea, where in this kind of juxtaposition of these two things I'm trying to talk about, the psychologist and behaviorist. Psychologist is actually coming into feelings first. How do so by again, it's like the capabilities. If you don't believe in the capability of somebody, it's like, well, that doesn't make me feel very good. And then other people be like, well, your feelings don't matter. You got to do the work. It was like, again, well, what is that doing? What is that? Is that creating trust between the leader and the employees?
I got a question. Philosophically, why do you think people lead like that from a distrustful idea in the first place? Is it because of the term supervisor? Meaning, if you have to watch over some people, you already come from the standpoint of, I have to watch over you because obviously you're not going to do what you're supposed to do without someone watching you. Because I guess in a lot of ways, I'm trying to figure out, like, why is that the first idea? Because we've all experienced these type of bosses, and I'm sure that it's not, well, maybe it is, maybe they aren't, but I would assume that most of them aren't jaded by having, like, I was such a good person and such a kind boss, and then all of a sudden, because I had such a bad situation, now I'm a mean boss. So I'm just kind of wondering why those positions, the people who end up filling them always or more often come from a place of not trusting the employees, whether it's in their skill set or whether it's in their work ethics. It's always, that energy. Just maybe.
I like to hand it over to Benjamin over here. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I think that's a great question, Patrick. And there are a lot of things that are at play here. One, the influence of our understanding of leadership through the lens of the military, right? And we talked a little bit, before about the differences between the corporate world and the military, but also you don't know what you don't know, right? And so you come in, like, building psychological safety on a team and involving someone and accommodating your work style to fit all these different work styles on your team. That's hard work. That's an art. You have to learn how to do that. We are in our infant stage in humanity of studying how to do that. And for the number of managers, leaders, supervisors that we have out there, most aren't getting any type of support in this space. And the ones that are, a lot of it sucks. A lot of it is impractical and it sucks. And so it's hard. There are a lot of challenges there. So I like to give a little buffer there, right? A little understanding. It's kind of similar to like when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden, I've been in learning and development for a while, so that's kind of my lens. But when the pandemic hit and everything had to be facilitated virtually, right? And we saw all these limiting beliefs about virtual training. It couldn't be as good as in-person training, would never be the same, blah, 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 blah. Well, we've been working together in person for hundreds of thousands of years. We've been working together virtually for less than the blink of an eye. So let's have some grace and understanding that we can work through that. It's part of our karma right now. But the second piece too, and this is where I try to focus my support, is a lot of people can hear a conversation like this around psychological safety, how to build trust, et cetera, and they get it, but it's like, how do I do it? How do I make it practical? What do I actually do? Because the thing about this is, while we are really fascinated with this stuff and have time to have discussions like this on this podcast, middle managers of America right now, their calendars look like Jackson Pollock paintings, and they're being asked to do more than they could possibly do in 40 or 50 hours a week. And then you want them to learn these different, leadership approaches and try these different behaviors themselves. So it's a tall order. So I think one of the big things we can do now, and this is, again, how I try to focus, is chunk things down to the key behavior units, make it extremely accessible and practical, provide people with like conversation planners, like little action guides, right? That they can just, they're not going back to a 400-page book written by somebody with a PhD that they've got to like wade through all this stuff to figure out what they actually need to do. And so I think that's part of the thing now is we got to make this more accessible, practical, and normalized, because when people take action and they see a result, then they get it and then they're motivated to come back.
Do you think there should be a department? I mean, I don't even know if not savvy enough, so maybe there is, but um, it's normally HR, I guess. But is there a department that handles that psychological nature in a court, well, alongside the supervisor or middle management? In other words, we just understand that they're in the military. We had the sergeants and the staff sergeants and the people who were in the field, and then we had the captains, the officers who handled, you know what I'm saying, a lot of the paperwork. One was with the troops, one was with the paperwork. The two actually talk to each other in order for, you know, the whole situation to run. And sometimes they may have disagreements, but the point of the matter is we had an advocate for our concerns out in the field, as well as the bottom line of what the military needed us to do. And I'm guessing in, you know, the thought is that that splitting of you know, that delegating of work being split might be beneficial. So is there a department that y'all know of that handles that type of thing, or should there be an avocation for a department that actually starts being implemented moving forward?
Yeah, it's different from, company to company. Some have, no support whatsoever. Others, it falls under HR. Some have training departments. Some don't have any support at all for this type of thing. It can fall under organizational development. It can fall under learning and development. So some companies will contract this work out to people like me. Other people, and I've had these roles before, will have somebody internally that can support leaders. So it comes in all shapes and sizes, but the majority, or I would say if you're getting any type of leadership development specific support on like how to have difficult conversations, how to manage performance, how to deliver critical feedback, you're in the minority. Most people, all their support is around the process of getting the actual work done. But to our conversation, parts of our conversation earlier, it's so important about how you feel, right? And so my leadership framework is based on 5 core psychological needs: to be appreciated, to be heard and acknowledged, to be involved, to be trusted, and to be supported. So you guys and listeners out there, you can think about this too. What happens when you're in a position where you don't feel appreciated? What happens when you don't feel involved and you're just told what to do? What happens when you're given a huge laundry list of things to do, but you're not given any support to get them done? Right. And so all these things play into your psychological safety, your willingness to perform what I call discretionary effort, which is so work beyond exactly what my, job description says I have to do, and how when you facilitate psychological safety, you get people who show up to work, feel comfortable being their authentic self, and are engaged and involved with what they're doing. And you're going to see better performance. I mean, all the research and literature indicates that, but you don't need the research and literature because it's common sense.
Yeah. I think honestly, what you just laid out seems like almost a blueprint for just human beings in life to feel connected in life. When one of those things go missing, it creates a hole. And that's how addictions come in and stuff like that, because one of your 5 is not there and you don't feel it. So yeah, that, you know, beyond the work environment, that is definite.
So it's a really great insight that you brought up there, Patrick. And it's one of my favorite aspects of this work, because so often I work with people through this professional lens, right? Of those core 5 needs in a professional space, but then I'll invite them to take some of the action steps that we talk about in their personal relationships, right? And people will come back to me and say, this was the piece that was missing in my marriage, right? Or this was why me and my brother haven't spoken in 3 years, and I never couldn't figure it out, because all these, you're exactly right. These are principles of human behavior. We're just talking about them in this specific lens, but they play everywhere.
Absolutely. So yeah, I definitely all in favor with that approach. I like that. It's awesome. Seems to cover everything.
But yeah, this is great. It's definitely having a great discussion here. I'm glad we're getting into the meat of it. Yeah. So kind of moving on, the idea here is about the old school bosses and new school bosses and what they're doing. And I really like the point you made about, giving people some grace too, because there's not too much information out there in the first place. So I thought that was really good. So in kind of the ideas around implementing these type of things for individuals on more of a, broad strokes kind of level, what I think is important is, like employee engagement, really important. Creating some sort of infrastructure in which you could gain this engagement. Maybe it's through survey. Maybe you need to create some kind of maybe it's a software or something, some sort of system in which this can be done repeatedly and can be tracked, and data can be put into some kind of um, well, if you will, or data center that can hold all this data, and then can help the leadership make decisions on that. I think that's an important piece. Coming from like a recruiting angle, it makes a lot of sense financially too, because if a particular person is looking for a raise of 20%, for example, and you typically like only give like 3%, and when it's done in a way which is collaborative with the other departments out there, that's like meaning that they collaborate with the financial budgets, collaborate with legal, and all the different people that need to be involved in making a good decision. If you're doing that and the person wants to get, say, a 20% increase, you can either keep that person and kind of through the collaboration create some kind of role or thing, or you'll lose them to another company. And by losing them, we'll go into what we talked about before in the article called frictional unemployment, which means that if you lose someone that is a high performer that's doing really great, it will cost you at least 20% to get them at the same level of training and development and everything as the person that left. So in essence, what I'm saying here is that if you were to just give that person, the high performing person, what they're looking for, and if it's a 20% increase in salary or whatever it is, I'm using that 20% increase in salary because it's an easy kind of financial metric. If you give them that, instead of losing them, you'll be better off.
Absolutely. The sad thing is they should have already had something in place for that person to slowly climb their way to that 20% through, actions taken that actually help the company turn more of a profit. Yeah, when you're just for unemployment space, you got to find a person. And if you're any reputable company, a lot of times the interview process will take a month to a month and a half. So you're almost, even if the day of you had somebody that was potential, you're still a month down in that position.
Yeah, recruiting takes a while. As I'm saying, background in recruiting, I know recruiting takes a while, and there's a lot of time in between, trying to find a new person, and then not to mention all the work that person was working on, how now has to go to other people, so they have limited time to actually do the interviews in the first place. So there's, yeah.
So basically, the argument is for the fact that it's not only kinder to think about humanity from a business standpoint. Almost moving forward, you almost can't afford to not think about making sure that we have systems in place to promote people and not lose talent to rival companies, because now that I've trained you, though you have the same level of upgrade for their company, the point is my investment is no longer there. It's gone. And you've, gotten pretty I would say prolific in the way we run our system. Every company has its own proprietary way of how they do business. And if you've been there for a while, you've become pretty good at it. And that losing all of that just seems to be a waste.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on that, Benjamin?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of hidden costs to turnover for sure, and I know hidden costs in morale and culture as well that aren't always as easily quantified. And I'm sure you've seen more, the specifics of that in your space, David. Overall, the more you can engage and enroll someone in a vision of themselves and the soul and purpose of a company, the more bought in people are going to be, the harder they're going to work, the better results you're going to get, the different feelings customers are going to have when they work, with you. And you're seeing that now with the opposite of that now, where, no one's offering pensions anymore, right? People know that to work their way up, they've got to issue loyalty, hop back and forth, and look at the results. And you, again, know this better than I do, David. Look at the result of that process on what it's like for someone to go out and look for a job right now. I mean, there's absolutely no respect coming in either direction. And our job market is just completely broken right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, job market's real tough. Real
I
tough. I mean, go ahead.
A question. You said culture, and it dawned on me that that's another thing that's not taken into consideration. Sometimes there are people who may not be the greatest performer, but they're the glue to your team. You don't
Yeah.
have very good interpersonal skills and can get everybody in the team to collaborate on an idea just because they know how to talk to them and how well they relate to them. And if you're not aware of that and lose that person, you could almost lose the entire team being separated, because there's a lot of people in the team that didn't get along and they only got along because that guy made it possible. So I think that is a major thing that's not even considered a lot of times when you have teams or losing members of a team. But I wanted to expand on, now we did have the major and we talked about a plan of action on a company, because I asked him the question that if a company didn't have this way of incentivizing their employees in order for them to get raises or, move up in the chain, how would you, or where would you start with creating that system for a company? How would you build that system from scratch for a company? And I would be curious on the same idea, just hypothetically, if you came into a company and their company culture didn't have those skills or that skill set, where would you start to try and flesh them out a program that could help, create that environment for that company?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, number one, no matter what's happening in a company, whether it be a lot of rapid change or you're looking to create some type of career path, I mean, whatever's happening, you always have to start with creating a space for employees to share and be heard and be involved. Because without those things, you are stunting psychological safety, and people will just do the bare minimum. And if they're not getting their needs met, they'll look elsewhere to get them met. And they'll do the bare minimum until they can get those needs met somewhere else, and they'll leave and go there. Even if I work with a lot of leaders when they're navigating change, right? Because it's spicy. Most people don't like change, right? Because there's the unknown. Even if you have a change that's coming through your team that is happening, regardless of how they feel about it, you still have to create that space to say, how are you all feeling about this? How do you think this is going to affect you? What's coming up for you? And then they're going to say whatever they're going to say. And then you got to say, yeah, that's completely understandable that you would feel that way, right? You got to validate that and then pull them in with involvement and support. Cool. So what I'm hearing is this aspect of the change is what's really is feeling really edgy. Am I getting that right? Yeah, cool. What would turn that down a little? Or what can I do that would help support us to get through this? And now you're creating this space for people to be heard. You're acknowledging and validating their experience. You're offering support. You're involving them. And so I would offer that, because there's also a reality that most companies, there isn't space for everybody to get promotion every year, right? There's a reality of what the work is and what positions are available. By no means do I want to live in a pretend world, right? And you can always pull on those 5 levers of psychological safety, no matter what the reality is. And good luck getting good results without doing that. So it always, for me, it always comes back to those 5 basics: appreciate people, create spaces for them to be heard and acknowledged, involve them, pull them in to the work that they're doing, trust them, and be trusted, and support them. And if you do those 5 things, you're going to be moving in the right direction. And if you're not doing those 5 things, you're like, good luck. It's going to be a slog.
Now, we were talking about it earlier, and I want to talk about it now. When it comes to old school bosses, I want to make sure we have a working definition on the thought of old school bosses, only because I would like to see if there's any time either of you could think of where that style of leadership is necessary or is more, or even some of the benefits of that, pros and cons. It couldn't have been all bad. So is there any things that we can take from that and repertoire?
I mean, the easiest one is safety. So sometimes when safety is paramount, you need to be clear and direct and tell someone what to do right then, right? And so that's part of the military aspect, because there isn't time for me to coach you and you to explore different options, which is important and I recommend in most situations. But the other thing is, when you need results like this moment, right? Then when you go direct, you can get those short-term results. But if you keep pushing that button in all situations, you're going to stunt employee engagement. You're going to stunt employee growth. You're going to stunt psychological safety.
Yeah.
By all means, absolutely. If safety is an issue, or like all of a sudden you have a red alert emergency of some type of deliverable you need to get done, put the leader hat on and delegate and get the thing done. But make that be the exception to the norm, right? Where a lot of times I think it's, no, I'm the boss. I have the power. I think this is what's best. So I'm just going to tell everybody what's best. And you're going to erode what little culture, cohesiveness, team unity you have to begin with.
I love this. I love this. I'm actually like feeling into a really good analogy here about like health and the nervous system as well, which is really interesting because it's like in life, like if you're constantly in emergency mode, your adrenaline is pumping on every single action that's being taken. You're going to be burnt out. You're going to be stressed out, and your body isn't meant to be always on this emergency alert system. And so it's like that's how we get chronic stress in America, these kind of chronic conditions.
I was going to go with a car, but same thing. We're on, yeah, you
But-
don't floor the whole time. As soon as you go out the garage, you want a nice cruise and speed. But yeah, if you need to accelerate and pass somebody, you want to know that it's in the tank to be able to do so. But yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, and I had another.
That's good. That's a good one. Now, that's a good one.
I had one other question. I think I asked about retention. One of the other things that I know happens a lot of times with old school bosses or old style leadership is that when given a project, let's say, they hand down a project for you to get done, but you may not be the most savvy on how to get the project done, and you got a team that you're supposed to, disseminate the information to. I would like to hear, thoughts on approaching something that you're aware of the results that is desired, but you're not sure of the direction. And in this situation, you're the leader of a team that is supposed to help you get it done. How would you approach that situation, that nuanced situation? Because, obviously the people in your team have some knowledge, it's their job, but you're going to have to massage the whole situation together. Do you have a...
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great question, Patrick. And so that falls under that trust and be trusted lever of psychological safety. And part of the way to drive that is to share authentically and to take ownership of your current reality. And so, what better opportunity to drive that trust than you get this project and you come to your team and say, hey, look, I have full confidence we're going to crush this. And actually not that familiar with this, building this widget, or whatever the thing is. And that's where you have an opportunity to then pull others in, right? Hey, David, I know, didn't you work in your last company? You worked in this space over here. Like, what are you seeing? What do you think would be important for us? Let me ask the rest of the team. What do you all think are the 3 core components of us crushing this project that I just shared with you, right? And a leader who can stand, or really anybody who can stand in, I don't have every freaking answer. Like, yeah, give me that person, right? Or the person who can make a mistake and own it. Like, I want that person on my team because they take that ownership, they take that accountability, and you know they're going to tell you the truth when they don't know something or when they mess something up, and you allow someone else, you allow others to shine. And just like we know the power of the diversity of thought, right? That is in action how you embrace it, right? I don't have all the pieces for this. I can admit that to you all. I know you all are super talented and intelligent around here. Like, let's source this together, right? And then people are like, oh, it's me about what I thought about this. And now you've got a chance to involve others, appreciate them, give them a chance to shine. They're going to go home and they're going to tell their partner about that. They're going to go home being like, dude, I can't wait to get back to work tomorrow to figure this thing out and be there for my team.
I totally agree with that answer. I think transparency is everything in leadership, especially when it comes to a situation of that nature. And we talked about how a lot of times they would push the burden of proof and never be transparent that they don't know what's really going on. So it's like, if you don't know what's going on, I can't tell you how to do your job. Or such clever phrases like that from the 80s that just keep the, cycle of never saying that I don't know what's going on and I need your help just as much, you know what I'm saying, as anybody else. So please, as a team, let's work together. They are not able to come off of that. And we explored it a little bit. Speaking of, it's like a parental complex where when you're the parent, being transparent to your children when you don't know what's going on because you're supposed to know everything that's going on becomes a hard thing, and it becomes an ingrained thought. And I feel like a lot of people take that of how they are with children and take that into the work environment as if the employees are too children, so they're never forthcoming.
Yeah, we had an article on that. We had an article on that. Treating grown adults like children. Yeah, that happens. And that's not fun. No one likes that. It's a good point.
But where were we leaving out?
I think we got all our points, man.
I think we're I'm looking at it. Yeah, I think we've hit pretty much everything. I don't have any
Conversation.
Yeah, no, this is well done.
Well,
All right, guys.
any of your listeners out there are looking for some support around practical, actionable ways to drive engagement and psychological safety, I'd love to chat. I'm all about this stuff. I'd love to come back on sometime. You guys let me know if there's anything I can do to support you or share with you. Let me know.
Leave your, say what's your contact, the best way to contact you, and we'll definitely put it, at the bottom or somewhere in the screen.
Great. Yeah, Ben DeBoard on LinkedIn, and my website is benjamindeboard.com, and that's about the extent of my social media.
Gotta limit that stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, this was great, and thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.